I'm all set for my first class, and I'm waiting for the host to start the meeting. I'm so excited. Got my caramel mocha, and I'm pumped. I could also use a blanket, it's a little chilly. So, first class done, and in true form, I'm already stressed because from our paperwork for me and Chelsea's rotation at CUSAC, it looks like we need to get fingerprinted at the Department of Education in Brooklyn. And they mentioned in class today that our rotation needs to start by September 21st. So that means that I need to be fingerprinted in Brooklyn before September 21st, if I'm interpreting that correctly. And I'm not going to be in New York at that point. I've emailed my supervisor, my rotation supervisor, for confirmation of this, because if that's the case, I need to book a flight to New York like right now. So not knowing what else to do while I await my supervisor's confirmation that I need to go on a random trip to New York, I just did a makeover. Coping skills. Alright, it's Wednesday the 9th, and we just finished our first embryology lecture this morning. So that was a huge source of stress for our class, the first class of embryology. But it wasn't too bad. And I was kind of worried that we were going to just like blow through the first 4 weeks of development in this first lecture. What we really did is we went over like, what are congenital anomalies? What can be the causes? We went over teratogens for a while, and then monogenic disorders that cause congenital anomalies, as well as chromosomal abnormalities. So more about like an overview of what we are studying in embryology, not like an overview of the development of the embryo, because that's a huge topic and is going to take 16 weeks to get through. So not too bad on that. It was kind of funny because our professor is very mature. She's a little bit of an older lady, and she is a pediatric cardiologist. She's not really interested in learning Zoom or PowerPoint. So our program director had to attend the lecture and serve as her technological aide. You know, that was kind of funny and cute. She's definitely a lady of her time, and we adore her for it. Then I actually had teletherapy today as well, and I'm really excited that now I'm in school again and we'll have free access to therapy. So I got to Zoom with a therapist named Anisha. I know it's not Annika. It looks like Annika and it's said completely different. So I believe her name is Anisha, and that's going to be a great resource for this semester with the stress of grad school. Oh yeah, and obviously I'm not in New York. I didn't have to book a flight to New York right that second. It appears that I will not have to get fingerprinted until I go in person to my rotation, which will be in a few weeks. So hopefully the timing actually works out pretty well, but possibly more on that later. Finally, here I am on Friday morning. So yesterday I had my last 2 classes of our first week. We had advanced human genetics, and then I'm not sure what to call the second class we had. It was listed on the schedule as pathophysiology, and then we got into class and he was like, this is functional anatomy and medical terminology, and my name's Tom and I have a PhD in geology. So that's quite the class. Basically, I think it's medical terminology. Those were both great classes and kind of stressed me out a little bit. I think it was partly like the timing, the evening classes right at the end of the week where I was a little more tired and overwhelmed. But basically in advanced human genetics, we went over like OMIM and like other genetic databases, how to use them, and then in medical terminology, anatomy, pathophysiology, whatever that was, we pretty much just talked for an hour and a half. And he told us that we should memorize medical terminology on our own, which is true. There's not really that much of a way to lecture on that. And then that brings us to today. So I've been starting to go through the asynchronous parts of Advanced Human Genetics, where we watch lectures on like factual topics, and then prepping for our quizzes, I suppose, where we before class we have to take a quiz on all of the lecture material, and there's quite a bit. Oh, and we're leaving for New York on Tuesday. We decided to go ahead and drive up there starting Tuesday morning, drive up there in about 3 days, and then quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel, just because if we moved in on the 1st and then we had to quarantine, I mean, it would just be like halfway through the semester before I could do anything really. And so we decided to go ahead and bite the bullet and take a quarantine. And I am so looking forward to getting up there. So this next week's vlog will include some travel across the country, which I'm super excited about. So to wrap up today's vlog, I wanted to go over a bit of stuff we learned in school. And this is from embryology, comparing trisomy 13 and trisomy 18. In case you didn't know, both of these conditions occur when an individual is born with a third copy of either chromosome 13 or 18. Now both of these trisomies have a given name. As you can see here, we have trisomy 18, which is Edwards syndrome. 18 is the age you can vote, that starts with E, and that will help us remember Edwards syndrome. And then 13 is the age of puberty, and then that starts with P, so that will help us remember Patau syndrome. So we're going to compare some of the phenotypic features of these two trisomies because they are quite similar, but they're important to distinguish. So there we go, Patau and Edwards syndromes. All right. First up, if we look at head, both of these conditions will involve a small head size. With Edwards syndrome, which is a little bit less severe, that's going to be microcephaly. So microcephaly just means literally a small head. So that brain would be compressed. Versus Patau syndrome, they experience holoprosencephaly. Holoprosencephaly actually refers to a lack of development of the forebrain. So you will get a small head, but it's more of a symptom of what's going on with the forebrain. Now both of these trisomies lead to pretty severe dysmorphology, and both of these conditions lead to death typically within the first year of life. However, the traits that they confer are distinguishable. For example, Patau syndrome confers midline defects, and midline defects are, as it sounds like, defects through the middle of the face and body, including the neural tube, the heart vasculature, and the mouth palate, as well as lower GI anomalies, which altogether lead to 13 being quite severe and conferring a very abnormal face, especially compared to Edwards syndrome, where the main facial findings are going to be micrognathia, which is a small jaw, as well as malformed ears. And you can see me emphasize here the cleft lip and palate that is distinguishing a Patau syndrome. Now moving on to the hands are pretty distinct between the two trisomies here. With Edwards syndrome, you see a clenched hand, meaning all the fingers are pulled into each other. On Patau syndrome, you see polydactyly, meaning extra digits, but they do have limb problems in common in that way, both with the digits and then with the characteristic rocker bottom foot. Also, both of them will experience intellectual disability and, unfortunately, as I mentioned, a highly shortened life. Many of these patients actually don't make it to birth, and those who do will die within the first week typically. On average, Edwards syndrome patients do live a little bit longer if they do manage to survive to birth, but unfortunately both of them are severely life-limiting. Both conditions tend to have the same cause of death actually, which would be cardiac arrest from heart defects, as well as apnea, so not breathing due to poor development of lungs and overall failure to thrive. So here's a closer view of the little Venn diagram that I made. These conditions are super important to learn about and be able to distinguish. Many doctors will think they're pretty similar, and it's our role as genetic counselors to prepare families for the differences and what they can expect in an affected pregnancy. So it seems like kind of a sad note to end on, but I do think it's super important. I know a lot of doctors will probably just say both of those are trisomies that lead to really early death. That's all we need to know. But we as genetic counselors are going to be there to give our patients the more detailed information, help them decide if they want to proceed with that pregnancy, and then prepare them for what will come after birth. So even though this is really sad information, it's going to help our patients have the best information that they can. So looking forward to next week. I'll be having Monday classes here, and then Tuesday morning we hit the road, and I'll be calling into class Wednesday, Thursday for the rest of my classes for the week, and then we go into our quarantines. I am looking forward to finally arriving there and being one step closer to getting to be with my classmates and be in person. So I'll look forward to speaking with you next week.